it's Tony. Welcome back to the Shire. Hobbit Racing here to present you another Scalextric tune. These cars are just, they're probably, if you have the need and the want and the place to race them that allows for this kind of open playground platform, especially bringing in the performance, there may be no more fun that you can have. Maybe a fly, right? Because, you know, again, think similar situations, a non-potted car, but a beautiful body. So let's see what happens to this Mustang. If you're doing a full tune breakdown on, you know, one of these Scalextric Trans Ams, I really love doing these cars. It's just a wonderful playground, a wonderful platform. If you're breaking one of these down and you're changing the motor, or even if you're not changing the motor, but you're certainly upgrading the guide, you're going to deal with the axle in the front to clean up the slop. But especially if you're going to do something to change the performance of the back, where you're going to get rid of the existing bushings and the slop and you want the opportunity for the gearing, you know, when you put these bushings, whether you have zero tolerance bushings, you know, NSR, slot car corner, whatever you're going to throw in there, for as much as you want to make sure that you get this straight, and I had to manipulate this one. This one went in a little bit funky, and so, you know, there's two things. You know, number one, put your motor in there, because your motor, if it's not fitting in the right way, it's going to change the bulkhead. So, you know, if you get that, you need to make sure that bulkhead fits in there the right way. And so then that you can actually freely spin and move the axle. But another thing can happen with these chassis, which you certainly can check for flatness if things are all broken down and you really are like, nah, I'm just not buying what's going on right there. And I may, because I'm probably going to take some, you know, body float opportunities and, you know, really trim the edges, or at least file the edges. But one of the great things that you can do now in this stage where you're really test fitting things, put the tires and wheels on. Now for this exercise, they're literally just sitting on there. I haven't snugged them at all. They're just sitting on top of that axle. I had a 60, so whatever, it's 60, it's gonna get trimmed. So the idea here would be check your contact patch, right? And make sure that everything is sitting flat in all angles, you know? So take it and come around from the back side as well. Don't shove it down too tight, but you wanna get underneath there and check that contact patch, right? I'm gonna probably not do it justice from this angle, but you know, I can check it myself when the camera's down, and for me that looks like we're making good rolling contact. But it's just a good rule of thumb, because at the end of the day, if you know you're not truly truing tires, even though you may take off some sharp edges, or you know, if you're doing a little bit of work on, you know, whatever it is, a urethane tire or even a regular rubber short tire, you know, or if it's silicone, you know, the worst thing you can do in that case is go the extra mile to make the modification, to tune the car to what you want to do to add performance to it, and then not check that you have a good rolling, running chassis, right? It's the same thing that Harry and Dave and George and anybody else will tell you when you're doing scratch building. This is the point where when you figure out if you have a good rolling chassis before you do anything else to the car. So, you know, hey, if you're using brass parts to fit a motor, you shouldn't have to worry about that. But listen, this car is probably, I don't know, 10 years old, maybe more. This car outdates me in the 32nd scale slot car history, and I was fortunate enough to get my hands on it. Beautiful. Once again, thank you, Ron Rutger, for that wonderful Christmas gift. And at the end of the day, you know, if you're going to take the time to go through these steps, the rolling chassis stage is where you need to be able to check and test fit things. And so now that I know that I have a good quality rolling chassis, I've got good contact patch, the bottom line is, if you're going to go through these steps that ultimately bring you fantastic performance, go check out my Tony DiLorenzo number 3 Camaro video. I'll link up here in the corner. It makes a world of difference. You don't want to go through all these steps. Like any tune that, whether you want to call it some modeling aspects or some true slot car tuning aspects, if you're going to go through these steps, then you've got to make sure you've got a good solid rolling chassis. Doesn't do you any good driving with the brakes on if you didn't have smooth rolling running here and that you weren't able to lubricate and then obviously get a good rolling chassis. So we've guaranteed that. And before I take the motor out, now this is the critical part, right? Before I take the motor out and I've got a rolling chassis, now is the time to carefully, with my toothpick, dip in and get a little bit of CA glue and just touch it on the top side of those two pieces of brass and let the CA glue and let gravity take over and let it slide down the sides and secure those bushings in place. And then of course, last but not least, when you have this done and locked in, you should be able to take this, so I can show you one-handed. That's a definite need. You need to check that you've got that, and you can just feel how easy and, unbound, if you will, how smooth that is to be able to do it. And then once you're in that rolling chassis position, then carefully get on there and glue those bushings into place. We've got 6 grams, probably closer to 7 if you include the pads that are on there. Now I've seen some suggestion that, oh, Tony, stick to center of gravity. Hey, as Yukon Cornelius once said, you eat what you like. You've got to test and tune. This is what's been successful for me with my Scalextric Trans Ams. Might this work? Maybe. Might it not work? We'll see. I've got my nice little custom paint job that I did on my wheels and made my custom paint job on my rear ones. It's not too dissimilar from the original, but I did some work to get to this color so that I used that on the front. That's how I arrived there. Already broke in this motor. Hey, listen, it's a Predator motor. It landed at 21.2K RPMs, 21,200 RPMs after 12 volts. So yeah, do they get underrated sometimes? Sure, it's very possible that that happens, but we're well on our way. We've got our front axle set. I need to do some work on the guide now. I can't recall, and we're going to find out right now, if I put a spacer in there. So let's see what we have so far. Well, we don't have a spacer in there so far, but we do have the CG adapter, which I take one step further and adapt even further, where I have shaved it to fit just so nicely right inside of there, where you can see that, see if I can't reduce this light to a little bit less brightness that's not necessarily needed at the moment. There you go. So I've got the CG adapter, but it has been further adapted where I have nicely shaved, get my hand out of the way here, I have nicely shaved down that CG adapter to fit perfectly in that opening that most Scalextric Trans Ams present to you. And so I've got it perfectly lined up with the shaft, and we've got nice smooth action. We're going to have to file it a little bit, right? I mean, let's not pretend that's far too tight, and you can see it sticks when it's in there. But what we want to do now is we want to make sure we can get the relief of the braid, right? I like to usually set mine up to the point where if I have everything engaged and I know my wheels barely roll, but that's a car that I can usually adjust my front axle on. So what I'd like to do before I even deal with that is I'm going to reset the rear, because this is not a game you want to play, right? Where's my guide going to rest, which is why I haven't touched that yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hope to start. Oh, that's a 34 tooth, so I reserved a 34 tooth here. Must have buttoned this back up when I wasn't quite ready to do it. So let's go ahead and dive in here in a little bit. Get my head out of the way. Grab ourselves an axle. Grab ourselves the gears that I set aside that I was going to start at. I think I'm starting here at 13. I think that's a 13 tooth. And that's a 34. So let's go ahead and grab our presser and press on to that. And let's set this. And let's find a good axle here. But what I always like to do with my axles is make sure they're clean before I start sanding something into it that I don't want to. And let's polish. Let's polish this axle. So let's go ahead and find our high grit. There it is right there. And let's polish, right? let's go right ahead and actually make sure we polish this axle. There's no reason not to, right? I mean, again, there might be certain places you race at with race directors saying, hey, you know, we don't want you doing that. But why? Why would you want to discredit what you've done to tune? Why would you want to take away and create friction? We're going to have to obviously cut this axle as well. So let's just go ahead and test fit, make sure we've got a good fitment and no issues here. Seems to be nice and smooth inside of there and no issues. I can choose that one. I could choose the other one. Really like the slotting plus as I destroyed the paper getting it out. Really love the slotting plus axles. Really, really love them. So we can already see here by looking at this that it's probably going to be far too wide to do us any good. So I'll probably set one of the sides and then we'll come back and make a notch and then we'll get rid of the other side. So let's go ahead and get our wheels out too while we're at it. We need to do that. And we need to, of course, grab our 0.9 and get our set screws in there. You really, really, really want to be careful at this stage too when you're opening up anything like these CB design packages and not lose sight of those set screws resting right there. So I'm going to try and do this all right here in front of me on the blue board, not lose those materials. Hopefully upside down is my answer. Hopefully upside down is my answer. There we go. That's what I was hoping for. Now, let's take our 0.9 and magnetically speaking, well, I guess I lost all magnetic power. Magneto, where are you when I need you? That's not happening. All right. Well, let's be careful here and just tip, not let them go too far. There we go. All right. Don't need to get them in there too far, right? We want to get them on the axle. So just a couple of threads worth, and you'll be just fine. All right. So let's try and set from one side. I'm going to have my inserts in there. And so because I'm going to have my inserts in there, we're going to go ahead and set against this one. And because my inserts are also going to come right up against there, right? These inserts are going to fall well inside of there, and maybe I'll stop them as far as how far I want to get them in there, and maybe I'll take a Posca pen or the Sharpie pen and as close to a dark green as I can and get it in there. So we're really aiming to get that axle flush on one side for now. That'll do the trick. Oh, and what did I decide? What do I typically do? Let's see. Can't set that guide height until we have a rolling chassis and then dealing with our relief on the track because of the braid gain. So I do need to choose some tires at this point in time. It looks like 34XFs are what I'm going to go with. As you've seen me do in the past, or if you haven't, inspect. No mold is perfect. Okay, those came out nice. I like it. I like it. Let's get them on here. Fit there. Let's get this guy on here. Okay. Next step. Let's go ahead. See what this is going to look like for us. I want to see what this is going to look like without any spacing. Right now I want to see what this is going to look like without any spacing, right up against the bushing with body. Okay. So without any spacing, it's already super tight, right? You got a little bit of daylight. There's a little bit of daylight right there underneath that wheel and that tire. So maybe there's some room to play. The nice thing about this Mustang is, from what I can tell, unless I went with a taller tire, we're not going to be having any body rub, right? It might not look the coolest. Like if you compare this to my Brass Am Mustang, my Castrol, I buried the rear end up inside of there, right? But look, we're not going to have any issues with the wheel well, and that's okay. It's going to be a great runner just like that, even though it's not going to look like a big hog in the rear. And that's okay. So I'm going to be able to fit a spacer in there. Oh, let's see what's up our sleeve. Let's try some .02. All right. Oops, I missed. There we go. Made it that time. Let's see what that looks like. Spinning wonderfully. Just that little bit of difference. Let's see what that little bit of difference makes for this car. Yep, I think I gapped it up. I think I gapped it up pretty nicely. Just that little bit of difference. Thruster bushing. Right in between there, some spacer. Looks great. Looks real nice. Right, I'm trying to stick within the sets of rules here. But this is not an open wheel modified. This is not a late model. We have tires that need to be tucked in under the body of the car. That's the way we race here in this class. So I think that looks great. So that means I can do the same thing on the other side now. Yes, I'm in line. Oh, no, there's some more in there. There's a few more in there. I take it back. I was going to say, I guess I'm in line for some more sideways spacers. We only are seeking for one to come out of the bag. And now, of course, multiple came out. But that's okay. There we go. All right. I don't know if you can see it, but I can see it. It's right there on the Predator motor sign. There it is. Okay. All right. Let's grab our running gear. So there shouldn't be any real reason for preferential treatment of which direction you want this to go on, whether it be this way or this way. I mean, it's most common that you probably wouldn't do that for different clearance reasons. So we're going to start out this way, and we're going to see what that looks like for us. I'm thinking that's going to be where I want to be. The only reason why I hesitate sometimes to do that is because if I want to play around with gear ratios, which who doesn't in classes that we have open gearing, the pinion gear can end up too deep. And if you don't have a slot invasion or the extra thin puller from the slotted ones, you can have trouble with something like the Ninko, that it's quite thick and you won't be able to get, you won't be able to get the puller. You won't be able to get the puller behind the gear. So you can take a look at what that's going to look like in there by just mocking it up. And I think ultimately that's going to provide me, that's still going to provide me enough space to get behind that gear. So I think we can double check our work here also in figuring out whether or not there's any necessity to run it one way or the other. And I don't think there is. Could run it the other way, it'd be right next to the tire, but again, it's plenty of tolerances inside of there that it shouldn't matter whether I want to put it on there this way or whether I want to put it on there that way. So I suppose it's certainly plausible to put it on there that way, and there should still be plenty of room for my wheel to get in there. And hopefully we've sucked up all the space in doing so. Now, that looks awkward. It is the right height. You can see that that gear is going to be cleared on the track. It's tight, but I'm going to go with it. And I think I am going to mount it more traditionally in the opposite direction. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. Just, oh, and I lost my spacer in my hand. Nope, it's right there. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. Again, whatever works for you, right? If you get free flow, nothing binding, there's no right or wrong way to put these things on there. As long as you've got good gear lash and you're not hitting your chassis or your body, then what's to say that that's not the right way to do it for your needs? For my needs, this is how I'm going to do it. And we're just going to put that on there just tight enough, create some spacing. That's probably too loose for my liking. I'm going to push it on there all the way and then pull it back just a little bit. That feels pretty nice to me. A hair more. And the reason why I say a hair more, once you add oil in there, you're going to create viscosity. And so even though you're going to still have that same theoretical spacing, the oil will, along with its viscosity, take up some of that space. And so you don't want to have things too tight until the oil dissipates. I want the oil to be a lubricant and not a binding factor. I'm not the expert in lubrication, but that's just my take on that. Could be wrong. Tell me in the comments, hey, Tony, you shouldn't have anything to worry about. Oil's going to disperse. But that's my tolerance right there. And you can always get your little, if you get any of the etched spacers, the etched spacers come with those little tolerance pieces that you can stick in there, and you can achieve that just by having that piece in there, tighten it, and then take the piece out. So let's take a look at what this looks like. All buttoned up here for just a second. Nice to see. It's not going to stay this way permanently, but I would like to see what it looks like. And of course, in this case, we want to put that wheel all the way up against that blue 34 tooth gear, because otherwise we will run out of spacing. And it may be too wide already as it is, but we'll find out right now. We'll find out right now. I'm going to take a look at this under the magnifying glass off camera for just a second to see if I like where things are sitting. Well, I noticed a couple of things. I noticed that I think the body wasn't on there completely when I talked about lack of wheel rubbing. There might be the opportunity for some wheels to rub that I certainly don't want, and I don't think we're going to have that happen. But it's certainly closer to the wheel well on the gear side than it is on this side. So maybe I will go ahead and leave the gear side as it is, and I'll put a larger spacer on this side. I think I'm going to go back and get that 0.02 again that I just put away and add a 0.01 to it. In this particular case, I have a nylon one, and that's okay. I'll go nylon in between my brass contacts. So we have a brass contact on the end. Wow, it's clear. There we go. We'll put nylon in there, and then we'll put brass back on here. Now keep in mind, I may have to adjust where my axle is in general, and I may have to slide everything over in this direction a little bit because I might miss. Yeah, I think I'm not gonna get back in there where I want it to be up against the. But it is only 0.01 more. That's not too bad. That's not too terrible. We're still well inside of there. So now what I can do is I can come back and I can create the space on the other side, which is going to require me to loosen both of these for a moment. You can always do that, and you should always do that, right? You want to get you want to have a good understanding that nothing's going to stop that from moving, right? Wiggle it around. We'll do body flow check later on, but just, wiggle it around, make sure nothing's happening. All right, that looks pretty stinking good to me. I'm going to go ahead again and check it under the magnifying glass. Whew, I am taking those tolerances to the extreme. This Mustang is at the limits. I could even stand to change this side from the 0.02 to the 0.01. I'm that close. But I think we're going to go with that for the time being. I'm not technically breaking any rules. If you were to look over the top of this, you can't see the tire until I really start to get past that point of the wheel well. So That's the part that matters when you look at it like that. I'm not cheating the system and putting it out wider than it's supposed to be. So you just barely, and then similarly on this side. So I'm gonna stick with that for the time being. Now we have a trick. If you were ever wondering, well, geez, what do we do now? How do we know how to cut this axle down to size? Funny you should ask. This is where we take our caliper and we use the opposite end of the caliper. I'm sure I'm not reinventing the wheel showing anybody this, but sometimes people forget. People forget that a caliper has two features. The caliper, of course, has this end of the caliper, but it also has this end of the caliper. Ba-boom. So you're going to get depth. So let's figure out our depth. Let's go ahead and zero this in millimeters. Body off of here. Go ahead. Oh, I didn't get a good zero. Let's get a zero, and then let's come in here. Figure out exactly how deep that is. Oops, I'm in the way on that side. Come in on this side. Make sure we're flush. I'm coming up with about 14.66. So I'm going to lock that because I want that setting. So now let's go ahead and disassemble. All right, so however you want to do this, whether you have a Sharpie or what have you, now would be the time to go ahead and make your mark. Hobbit Racing Center in Houma, Washington. There you go. I don't know if you can see that mark, but there's a mark on there. I'll be back after I tremble it off. Now we got a rolling chassis, as they say, with a gear mesh in line. This motor has already been broken in, as you pointed out. So now it's time to go ahead and get our guide height set so that we can come over here to the track and we can then look at the relief, right? We can look at the relief that we want to create and where the depth. We want to figure out where we want the depth of that. Now, there's some simple things that you can do. I could always just push that down and then add a little bit of gain for the braid gain that'll be in there, or I could put some braid in there too and do that in advance. Oh, look at these guys hanging out. Wow, that's beautiful. Ooh, I'm distracted, sorry. And so, you know, that's maybe what we'll do. And then you can also easily just come underneath the side of the car right here. And then if I can get the light right, again, little things that you can do. You can already see, here, let's just turn it over. We know the guide's on there pretty tight. Look at that, that is at least 2 or 3, maybe that's 30, you know, 30 hundredths, 300ths, 3/10, whatever I'm trying to say, 3/10. You know, the spacers I think are in 0.01 increments. So when you combine the braid, I think maybe I could put a 0.02 spacer in there, 0.02 of an inch, combine with the braid, and then we can go ahead and chop that off, right? Because if you notice now, if I go to do the old press trick, you'll notice quickly that a little bit more of it was just exposed. So that's just, you know, whichever way you want to try and get to the gain. Now, if you want to take calipers and try and figure it out that way, that's another way to do it too. But I already know that I've got a flush bottom with the CG guide adapter. So right now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put some braid on the guide and then reset myself in the slot and get a very good estimation. All right, so now I wasn't going to bore anybody with putting braid in a guide or putting a spacer on there, but I don't know if you can already see that there's a white spacer. I chose a nylon one this time. And so what we've got in there is a 0.02 and the braid. And so now we're going to check our braid gain here, right? And boy, if that's not almost perfectly spot on, there's literally almost no depth in play there when I push down on the chassis, right, to get that guide back up, and then push my finger back down to make sure that the braid is flush against the track. It is spot on right there. So that's what we want. That's what we're looking for. We want to find that point where, sorry about the camera here, I'm holding it in my hand for a moment. We want to get that guide as low as possible without creating too much slop. Clearly we have a good setup because we've got almost a double fluted opening with the CG adapter and the original scaly gooseneck. And so that is about as good as I can get it from a stability standpoint there. And then we'll check out my weight. And now it's time again to do a little bit of cleanup on this so I can clip that to the right height. There you go. You just saw it perhaps shimmy down just a little bit. We got to solder that motor up, and then we can get some leads on there and get this car out to the track. So what can we do here? Remember, I talked about this being just slightly tight. And then don't forget, whenever you put in an aftermarket guide, that you want to be snug, but not too snug. When you put a screw inside of that 3D printed plastic, you're definitely going to end up widening the cylinder. So whether I just do a little bit at first and not overdo it, right? You can never put it back. I mean, sure, there are maybe some techniques to add some thickness back to it that we won't get into here that are not necessarily recommended. But, you know, we want to get a nice free flowing. That's pretty good. It's pretty good that something with a little bit of lubrication could basically be fine. In fact, it's loosening up even more that those particles are coming out of the way. So I think we're going to stick with that for now, and then we're going to find out what the difference is when we open that hole up and we end up putting in the guide screw. So remember, lubricate, always lubricate where lubrication is necessary. Yeah, that's nice. That's really nice. But again, if your guide were only going to be sitting just like that, that would be the case. But we need to go get a slotting plus. We need to get a slotting plus screw. Yay! Magnets work sometimes. So again, you've seen me do it once, or maybe you've never seen me do it at all, because I was going to say you've seen me do it 100 times. It's your choice. You want to come in as best you can. Clearly, if you're going to do it on the setup block, put the setup block on the flat side if you have bought a professionally made one, or if you made one yourself and didn't put a relief in it. But don't use this side. You're only going to press the guide and it's going to fall down by, I don't know, what is that, 5 or 6 millimeters? So, you know, start out with it flush. You're going to press against it, and you can see that I've already got it at the height I wanted to. You can notice if I push down, that guide is not coming up any higher. So you want to just be coming in as straight from the top as you can and create those fresh new threads into that plastic. And once you see yourself coming with close, then maybe give it a stop and take a peek and see what you did. All right, well, that's far too tight. That's far too tight. That's pretty good in terms of where I think it'll be, where I don't want slop from the screw. But of course, the more I loosen, eventually I will create slop from the screw. And so it's likely that, again, I'll have to take off a little bit of that top of the gooseneck on the inside, because no matter how much I loosen it, eventually I'll be able to slide it up and down, and that's what we don't want. We don't want to create gaps in there. So now that's just about where I think that's going to be settled, and it's far too tight. But again, that was our first attempt at threading into a brand new piece of 3D printed plastic that is undoubtedly going to widen as we put that in there. And now we can come back and do the typical situation. Take our rat tail and just start to work on the top a little bit. A little goes a long way, as long as you're getting that in all 360 degrees. It's not some situation that you want to just file forever, or just, you know, kick back while you're listening to a song and all of a sudden you look up 2 minutes later and you're like, maybe I should have stopped sooner. Now, of course, you won't learn very much from doing that. You have to put the screw back in each time. So it's certainly a trial and error situation by doing that until you get it to where you want it to be. Maybe you want your guide a little bit more snug than you think. That's your preference. I like my guides to be absolutely free movement so that my motor wires and whatever else I do inside of there allows them to snap back straight. One of the other tricks that I like to do at this point is, now that I knew where it was, without putting it all the way down, right? I've left a gap. Clearly you would never leave it like that, but I've left a gap, and maybe I could take that gap up a little bit more. Now is the time to check it. Why screw it all the way in? It's not going to be. What we're trying to figure out now is, do we still need to file? And yes, the answer is yes, it's still far too tight for my liking. But this way you don't have to go all the way down. If you already can check it by going only about half of the threads in, then you know you still have work ahead of you. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is the part where doing all these little modifications pay dividends I've said it once, and I've said it 1,000 times for real this time when I say that. Friction is the enemy, whether it be your axle blocks, whether it be the gooseneck and the guide. That's feeling really, really nice there. The rewards will be reaped once we get onto the track. There it is. There it is. Now I can tell you, perhaps, as we have maybe a millimeter more to gap up, that it could need just a slight bit more at the top, but we are just about there. Now it is really close to free floating. And it does. It just needs a little bit more. The top is getting wider, of course, as that screw is going in, or other parts of it are getting a little bit wider as it makes its way down. So that's probably where it's going to land. I can see that I can't pull it up and down. It's not really overly tight. It's in the right place. I can't pull it up and down, but if I continue to loosen, eventually I will be able to pull it up and down, and that's not quite enough. That's going to stay there. It's not quite enough, in my opinion, where the motor wire configuration is going to straighten the guide. That's the old that's the old trick where every time you de-slot and someone goes to put your car back in the slot and they try and put it in and they can't figure out why, and then they turn the car over and the guide's like that and they have to straighten it out with their finger, right? And it's not necessarily that's anything wrong with that if that's how you like your guides to be. I personally like my guides to be able to snap back. The whole principle of losing that friction. I'm going to say there's a high probability that we have completed the guide. And I'm going to take this over to the iron. And again, I'm not going to bore anybody in the soldering iron exercise. But it's very much free moving now, very easily. Now this don't get tricked when you do things like this. You have a 15-gram motor or more in here or whatever, and you got 7-8 grams of weight right here. Clearly, you're going to pendulum no matter what. It's all about when you're doing it with this hand to see whether or not it's loose enough. Just because you could pendulum swing that even if it was tight, I'm sure, just due to the amount of 50, 60 some odd grams below your center of gravity when you're holding a car like this. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing right there. There we go. We are snug, and it is just easily movable. That's what you're trying. That's what you're going for. Well, here we are onto the rolling road. So we have a few things to discuss. So this motor was broken in, as I mentioned before. So now we're on the rolling road at about 4.5 volts. And I did an excessive amount of wire cleanup, which again, depending on the weight, okay, that's fine. That might not stay there. But what's done around the motor was certainly on purpose. I have a carded interior that is pretty tight wrapped around there. So you can see I really got my wires down there, and there is, believe it or not, some wire maintenance right there. You can see those little dots, but I don't trust that stuff, so I put that on there. So we're rolling out right now. Didn't seem the need to show anybody my skills with the soldering iron or the eyelets for the guide. So we should be ready to get on the track within the next half hour or so as we make our way from 4.4 4.5 volts, 4.5 volts. We'll get to 8 volts, and then we'll finally get to 12 volts, and then we'll bring it on the track where we run it at 9.5 volts. Well, we're up to 8.5 volts now, and one of the things that I always like to kind of point out is, notice how nice and free spinning and lubricated the front axle is, and because we're on a rail here, and not the relief of the track, that is exactly what I expect to happen. I've actually created lift at the front because we're resting on the guide, and the front axle is completely free to do whatever it needs to do just from vibrational principle it's rotating. Very smooth, very smooth running here. I haven't even knocked any edges off of the quick slicks at this point. I can't wait to get this car out there on the track, but even without having knocked any edges off of the tires, we are looking great. I'm going to put the body on in a moment when we finally get to 12 volts. Woo, that is looking so sharp. Wow. That is looking so sharp. My goodness, that looks amazing. I don't know. Maybe not everybody's a fan of my wheel color, but That is just, golly, man. I'm not a Ford guy, but I'm a Mustang guy, so I'll take a Mustang any day of the week. I might drive a Sierra, but I'll take a Mustang any day of the week, especially. Wow, that is, I could stare at that thing all day long. My goodness, that is a good looking race car right there. Wow. Wow. This is going to be some sweet, sweet action on the track. We've got, body float already dialed in. I'm using CH51s. So those are slotted. Those should be slotted. Tall shoulders with no threads. That even looks cool in that darkness right there. Man, oh man. We will be on the track very soon. That was great. And we're about to hit the track in part 2. And that's where we're really going to start to dial in. And all those little incremental things that we did are going to just, again, we're going to reap the rewards of that out here on this track. And then we're going to make a few more adjustments, and we're just going to really see where this car lands. And it's just, these Scalextric Trans Am cars are just a joy to play around with. So thanks for watching. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Give me some likes and some feedback, because as you know, it helps this little channel doing these little things with these little cars. Thanks for watching.
If you don't subscribe to Hobbit Racing, I'll poke you with my staff. Pokey, pokey, pokey. She will poke you with her staff. Pokey!